Sarah never imagined that a simple leg pain would change everything she thought she knew about herself. But sometimes life surprises us in the strangest ways. It started on a Tuesday morning when Sarah woke up feeling a sharp pain shooting down her leg. She tried walking around her apartment, hoping the hurt would go away, but it stayed. The pain was annoying, like a little voice that wouldn't stop talking. Her home felt extra quiet that day. Her husband Mark was always working late these days. He barely had time to talk to her anymore. She still loved him, but lately it felt like they were two strangers living in the same house. Sarah looked around her living room. Sunshine came through the windows and made bright lines on the floor. She saw dust on the shelves and her old coffee mug sitting on the table from yesterday. Her leg hurt more when she tried to stand up. Finally, she made a decision she had never made before. She would call someone to come give her a massage at home. Sarah felt nervous about having a stranger come to her apartment, but the pain was too much to ignore. She picked up her phone and started looking for massage services nearby. After a few minutes of searching, she found one that looked good. About 30 minutes later, her doorbell rang. Sarah walked slowly to the door and opened it. Standing there was a man named Jake. He was tall and had a friendly smile that made her feel less worried right away. He said hello and told her he was there to help with her leg. His voice was kind and calm. Sarah smiled back and felt a little flutter of something in her stomach, though she wasn't sure what it was. She showed Jake into her living room and pointed to where he could set up his things. Jake moved around easily, like he had done this job many times. He took out a bag and carefully arranged his bottles of oil and clean towels on the table. Sarah watched him from the side of her eye. She felt a mix of relief that help was here and nervousness, because this was something new. She had never had someone focus on her body like this before. As Jake set up a special table for the massage, Sarah tried to think only about her sore leg and how good it would feel when the pain went away. Jake spoke softly and told her to lie down and relax. He said she should tell him if anything hurt or felt wrong. When his hands touched her leg, they felt warm. At first, he pressed gently, then slowly pushed harder into her muscles. Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. The tightness in her leg started to melt away like ice cream on a hot day. For a few moments, it felt like the pain had never been there at all. There was something peaceful about how Jake worked. He didn't rush through anything. He seemed to really pay attention to how she reacted. Every once in a while, his eyes would look at hers for just a second before going back to the massage. It wasn't anything strange or wrong, but it made Sarah very aware of how warm and caring he seemed. She tried to move her thoughts away from that feeling and focus on how much better her leg felt. But as the minutes went by, Sarah realized she was enjoying more than just the massage itself. Something about Jake's presence felt soothing. His easy smile, the way he knew exactly how hard to press, even the calm sound of his voice. She hadn't noticed it before, but it had been such a long time since anyone paid this much careful attention to what she needed. Really looked at her and cared about how she felt. A small, guilty thought popped into her head. Mark never had this kind of patience with her anymore. Not for a long time. After working on her leg for a while, Jake asked if everything felt okay. He tilted his head slightly, and his eyes still looked kind and professional. Sarah nodded, and her voice came out somewhere between casual and unsure. She told him yes, it felt really good actually. She let her head fall back and closed her eyes, trying to lose herself in the simple relief of having her pain go away. The room was warm, the sunlight was soft, and for the first time in many months, she felt a small bit of peace inside. But there was something else too. A different kind of tension she couldn't quite understand. It was in the way Jake's fingers moved carefully over her muscles. The way he paused sometimes, like he could feel every tiny movement of her body. Sarah's heart started beating a little faster, and she told herself to stop being silly. This was just a massage, just someone doing their job. There was nothing more to it. She reminded herself of that as she tried to focus on the leg pain that had made her call him in the first place. Still, as the session continued, she couldn't stop a feeling of curiosity. She felt noticed in a way that went beyond just fixing her sore leg. Jake's attention was quiet but impossible to miss, and it made her feel a warmth that wasn't completely comfortable but wasn't bad either. The difference between the simple human touch she was getting now and the emotional space she felt from Mark was too big to ignore. When the massage finally ended, Sarah's leg felt so much better. She thanked Jake, feeling a bit embarrassed about how aware she had been of his presence the whole time. He packed his things quickly, gave her a polite smile, and said he hoped her leg would feel even better tomorrow. He told her not to worry about calling if she needed another session. As the door closed behind him, Sarah stood in her living room. Her leg didn't hurt anymore, but her mind was spinning with thoughts. Something about his visit had stirred up feelings inside her that made her feel both alive and nervous at the same time. She sat down on the couch, thinking about the strange mix of relief and tension running through her body. One thing was clear. The day had started with pain in her leg, but it ended with something far more complicated growing in her heart. A quiet curiosity and maybe the first spark of something she wasn't ready to think about yet. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself thinking about Jake way more than she expected. It wasn't just about the massage or how much better her leg felt. It was about the attention he gave her, the way he listened, the gentle warmth of being around him. Every time her phone made a sound, part of her hoped it might be him sending a polite message to check on her leg. She knew this was silly. He was just doing his job. But still, the thought made her chest feel fluttery. When her leg hurt a little bit one evening after a long day, she made a quiet decision. She picked up her phone and called the same number, feeling her heart beat faster. Jake answered quickly, like he had been waiting for someone to call. He said hello, and asked how her leg was feeling. She smiled, feeling a little shy, and told him it was better, but she thought another session might help. She tried to sound normal and casual. There was a small pause, then a soft laugh on the other end of the phone. He said of course, he could come over tomorrow evening if that time worked for her. The next evening, when Jake arrived at her door, Sarah felt a strange mix of excitement and guilt. She let him inside, and this time she noticed how easily he moved through her apartment, as if he had been there lots of times before. There was a comfort now, a rhythm to what they were doing that went beyond just being professional. Sarah tried to focus on her leg, but she found herself noticing his presence in a way that made her stomach do little flips as Jake worked on her leg. The tightness melted away again, but it was replaced by a different kind of tension, one she couldn't easily explain. His hands were steady and strong, but also gentle. Every movement seemed careful and purposeful, but subtle enough to stay appropriate. Sarah felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She realized her mind was wandering into thoughts she hadn't expected. Thoughts about closeness, about being understood, about being truly seen by someone. Jake told her to let him know if the pressure was too much. His voice was low and calm, and there was a softness in it that made Sarah's heart beat faster. She shook her head and whispered that no, it was perfect. She caught herself stealing glances at him, looking at him from under her eyelashes, noticing the way his eyes briefly met hers before returning to his work. There was a closeness here, not physical in an obvious way, but in the small gestures, the little attentions, the way he seemed to be completely present with her. Sarah realized she was talking more than usual. She found herself sharing little things about her day, her frustrations with work, the quiet loneliness that often followed her around the house. Jake listened without interrupting. His face stayed calm and his hands never stopped their careful movements. There was something about being listened to so completely that made her heart ache a little. For months, she had wanted someone to truly notice her, to care about the small details of her life. And here it was. Unexpected but real. At some point, her hand accidentally brushed against his while she was adjusting her position. It was quick, almost impossible to notice, but it sent a shiver through her whole body. Jake's hand stopped for the tiniest moment, then moved again, staying professional but not ignoring the small connection that had happened. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest, a guilty thrill that made her heart race. She reminded herself this was just a massage, just a professional appointment. She repeated it in her mind like a song, but it did little to ease the tension that had quietly begun to build between them. Minutes passed, each one stretching with quiet closeness. Sarah became aware of every single detail. The warmth of the room, the light scent of oils, the way Jake's hand moved with careful attention, and the occasional soft brush of his fingers against her skin that sent shivers through her. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, the way her body seemed to respond to the smallest things. It wasn't obvious. It didn't cross any lines, but it was there. Impossible to deny and exciting in a way that scared her. When Jake said he was almost done, his voice was a gentle anchor in the quiet room. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. There was a lingering ache in more than just her leg. It was a longing she hadn't fully understood before. She realized that this wasn't just about pain relief anymore. It was about connection, attention, the simple human need to be noticed and cared for. As the session ended, Jake packed his things carefully. There was a pause when he looked at her. His eyes stayed on her just a moment longer than before, and Sarah felt her chest tighten. He said he hoped she was feeling better, and his tone carried a warmth that went beyond just being professional. Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling shy. She told him softly that yes, she did feel better, and thanked him. The words felt too small for the storm of emotions swirling inside her after he left. Sarah sat quietly on the couch. Her leg felt better, but her mind was racing with thoughts. She couldn't stop thinking about him, the way he had made her feel seen, the gentle care he showed, the warmth of his presence. Part of her felt guilty for the thoughts creeping into her mind, but another part felt excited and alive. She was more aware than ever of the distance that had grown between her and Mark. The contrast was sharper now, almost painful in how clear it was. Sarah realized that what she felt was complicated. It wasn't just attraction. It was a desire for attention, for connection, for someone who seemed to care about her in a way she hadn't realized she missed so deeply. She took a deep breath, letting herself feel the tension without judging herself too harshly. She understood that life had a way of presenting unexpected emotions at unexpected times. Jake had awakened something inside her, something she couldn't quite name, and it both excited and frightened her at the same time. The night went on, and Sarah finally stood up and walked toward the window. She watched the city lights twinkling in the distance, a quiet smile on her lips. She knew that things had changed, in small ways, but in ways that couldn't be undone. Her heart felt lighter in some ways, but heavier in others. She had experienced something rare, a connection that was gentle but powerful, and she didn't know where it would lead. One thing was certain. Her world had shifted, and nothing would feel quite the same again. The days that came after carried a strange rhythm she had never known before. Her mornings began with the same routine. Making coffee in the kitchen, Mark leaving early with a quick kiss on her cheek that felt more like habit than love, and the house falling into its heavy silence. But now there was something new living in her thoughts. She found herself listening for footsteps outside, waiting for a knock on the door, or looking through the window to see if Jake might walk by. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper. something that filled the small empty spaces of her day. She started noticing details about him that she hadn't paid attention to before. The way his hands moved when he worked, the quiet focus in his eyes, the warmth of his smile when he let himself show it. Those details carved themselves into her memory, growing heavier with each passing moment. One afternoon, she saw him walking by her building, and without thinking, she called out his name. He turned, looking hesitant as always. But when he stepped closer, she felt her heart skip in a way that embarrassed her. She asked him if he had time for tea, and he nodded almost shyly, as though her invitation was something fragile and special. They sat across from each other at the small wooden table in her kitchen. She poured the tea, her hands shaking slightly, though she tried to hide it. Their conversation was simple and easy. He told her a little about his family, his work, his plans for the future. But beneath those words, there was a current she couldn't ignore. Every time his eyes met hers, she felt a warmth spread through her. A warmth she hadn't felt in years. There was a moment when their hands brushed as she passed him the sugar bowl, and the touch lasted longer than it should have. It was nothing really, just skin against skin, but it sent a wave through her entire body. She pulled her hand back quickly, trying to laugh it off, but inside she was shaken. That single touch had said more than an entire conversation could ever say. She told herself again and again that it was harmless. But harmless things don't make your heart race when you're alone in bed at night, replaying every look, every word, every brush of the hand. Harmless things don't make you choose your clothes more carefully before stepping outside, hoping he might notice. Harmless things don't make you feel alive when you had almost forgotten what that feeling meant. It wasn't long before their moments together grew longer and longer. Sometimes he helped her carry grocery bags inside. Sometimes he stayed just a little too long after fixing something around the house. And each time, the silence between them grew heavier, filled with something unsaid but definitely present. One evening, as the sun was going down and painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they found themselves walking together down the quiet street. The world felt softer somehow. The air was heavy with the kind of stillness that makes people want to share secrets. Sarah told him how she often felt invisible, how years of marriage had made her question if she was still the same woman she once was. He listened, really truly listened, without judging or interrupting her. And when he finally spoke, his words were simple but went straight into her heart. He said softly that she wasn't invisible at all. He said she was more present than she realized. Sarah didn't know how to respond. Her throat felt tight and she could only look away, because in that moment she knew exactly what was happening. Her heart was leaning toward him, and every logical thought she had was losing its power. That night, she lay awake while Mark slept beside her, his steady breathing filling the room. She stared at the ceiling, torn between guilt and longing. She hadn't crossed any physical line, but her heart had already betrayed Mark. She had already begun giving pieces of herself to someone else. And the weight of it pressed heavily on her chest. The next time Jake came by, the air between them was different. It wasn't just unspoken tension anymore. It was something impossible to ignore. They sat close on the couch, talking quietly about nothing important and everything important at the same time. There was a moment when his arm brushed against hers. Neither of them moved away. She could feel the warmth coming from him, and she let herself lean just slightly closer, almost without realizing she was doing it. She knew it was dangerous, but she didn't pull back. For years, she had been starved of touch, of closeness, of the kind of intimacy that was more than just going through the motions. And here it was, tempting her in the most subtle but powerful way. When their eyes met, the world seemed to pause and hold its breath. There was no kiss, no big dramatic gesture, just a look that lasted long and unbroken, saying everything they couldn't put into words. In that silence, Sarah felt exposed and vulnerable, but also more alive than she had felt in a very long time. Her pulse quickened, and for a moment, she almost forgot to breathe. But the guilt didn't disappear. It waited for her in the quiet moments after Jake left. She found herself caught between two lives. The one she had built with Mark, safe and predictable but empty, and the one she was secretly creating with Jake, thrilling but dangerous. Her friend Martha noticed something was different one afternoon when they met for coffee. Martha leaned across the table, her eyes sharp and knowing, and asked if there was someone else in Sarah's life. Sarah froze, almost spilling her cup, before shaking her head too quickly. But Martha saw it written on her face, in the hesitation Sarah couldn't hide. Martha didn't push for more details, though. She simply let out a long breath and said to be careful. She said temptation always feels sweet at first, but it leaves a bitter taste afterward. Her words echoed in Sarah's mind for a long time after, but they didn't stop her. By then, it was too late. She had already crossed a line in her heart, a line she couldn't erase or go back over. She told herself she could still control it, that she wouldn't let it go any further. But deep down, she knew control was slipping through her fingers like sand. The truth was simple and complicated at the same time. Sarah wanted Jake. Not just his presence, not just his quiet comfort. She wanted the way he made her feel. Desired, seen, alive. And in that wanting, she knew she was risking everything she had built. But sometimes, when your heart has been empty for too long, even the risk feels worth it. Sarah didn't know what would happen next. All she knew was that something inside her had changed forever, and there was no going back to the person she used to be.